My name is David Ledesma, and welcome to this interview with Sarah Emerson, who's president of the Energy Security Analysis Inc. Sarah, welcome. Nice to have you in Amsterdam.
Thanks.
Hope your flight went well.
It went well,
it's
yes.
tiring, isn't it?
Good to be here.
Thank you. We've got a few questions I'd just like to discuss with reference to particularly to oil, and I think the first one that's interesting to the audience here at Flame is that it's really remarkable to see how oil and gas prices have diverged in the USA.
Yeah,
and indeed, talk about $10 with the current differential. I was wondering whether you can see this differential actually remaining into the future.
I actually do see it remaining. I think if you look 10, 15, 20 years out, it may converge again. But I think for at least the next decade, I think it's going to stay fairly wide.
Really? And do you think fuel switching, and actually giving support to gas demand is not going to narrow that differential then?
Not really, because as you know, in the United States, we don't really use oil in power generation,
right,
and that's the primary location for fuel switching.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who feel that we will fuel switch in the transportation sector. I personally don't think that will go very far. No.
Okay,
no.
So certainly your president, I think, believes that might be the case.
Well, the president has lots of ideas.
You can cut that, don't worry. It's okay, I couldn't resist that. Okay. Yeah.
No, it's hard to put gas into transportation directly as gas. So you're looking at compressed natural gas.
Yes.
Well, as you know, there are all kinds of issues with infrastructure
and
getting gas to the consumer for their vehicle, because you have to keep it under pressure, you have to liquefy it. I mean, it's not easy to do. So I don't think that's an easy thing. Now, what you could see is an increase in power consumption of gas for electric vehicles.
Okay, yes.
And that would, but that's really in the power side, and it's more power growth.
Yes.
And actually, to be honest with you, we're not that optimistic about electric vehicles either, because they're expensive.
Yes, absolutely. And in the end, the consumer is going to pay or not pay, aren't they?
That's right, that's right. So in the United States, I don't see the fundamentals pulling them back together. They're two very different markets.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can I take us perhaps to a wider global perspective now and talk about kind of specifically oil prices? And it was interesting to see, with the following the death of Osama bin Laden, oil prices fell. As the market felt, global risk levels have actually reduced as a result. And I just wondered, what size of market risk premium do we see in the oil price today? And could this, be reduced further in some way?
Well, it's an interesting question, because you cannot measure the risk premium. Everyone has a different sense as to what that is.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the death of bin Laden and the oil price is, I think what it did more than anything is it disrupted the news cycle. Okay. Yeah. So that a market that was very much concentrating on the Middle East uprisings, and it was concentrated on Libya, and would Saudi Arabia bring enough oil to the market to replace Libya? That was the focus. And I think one of the things that, for 48 hours we had nothing but news about bin Laden.
Yes, exactly.
And in a way, it kind of just sort of broke the tension, and it got people thinking about other things. And the other things they start thinking about are the economy. Yeah, exactly. The U.S. economy, some of the European economies, the potential for China to clamp down on its growth to stop inflation. Yes. And then we had a couple of interesting stories, such as the unemployment numbers came out. Okay. So things just sort of reacted. So
you got more back to fundamentals rather than.
Yes, I think actually the fundamental price is still lower than $100. I think it's closer to 90 than 100.
So therefore, what we're talking about a $20 premium.
So I think we've got right now a $10 to $15 premium. As it moves back up, we're going to have more premium. But absolutely, it's a risk premium, and it's a risk premium in many ways. It's a risk premium about Libya. It's a risk premium about other potential producers. It's a risk premium in a way about the dollar. Yeah. So it's not just one amorphous thing. It's almost like several premiums on top of each other. Yes. So the fundamentals, to my mind, are still lower than today's price.
Well, you mentioned China a couple of minutes ago, and certainly the pace and size of China and a huge uncertainty for energy demand. We've been hearing that at the conference with respect to gas as well as oil, of course. And really, the question I'd like to ask is: has the Japanese earthquake and China's review on nuclear policy, nuclear power? I'll start again on that. Okay. The question I'd like to ask is that the pace and size of China growth is a huge uncertainty in the energy market, and really, has the Japanese earthquake and the China review on nuclear power and power plant approvals increased this uncertainty? Could we actually see China importing even more gas and oil as a result?
Well, I think absolutely the events in Japan have been a shot across the bow for nuclear development everywhere in the world. I think Japan especially, it's going to be very interesting to see where nuclear goes in Japan, which always has had nuclear as a big part of its energy future. China, I think, has also had nuclear as a part of its energy future, but has been on a slower track. And I would agree with you. I think it takes, I'm not saying it takes nuclear off the table, but it certainly is going to slow down anything that's moving forward. You know, the issue with China right now is, you know, they have some coal problems. So they're having trouble generating power. So you're seeing them going out, and they're short diesel, so they're going out buying diesel. I think that's probably why their imports seem so large this year. But to me, a bigger issue with China is what are they going to do about their inflation rate? And are they going to try to constrain economic growth in any way in order to tamp down inflation? And that, to me, is a much bigger issue. I think the nuclear is really a long-term issue. You know, I think nuclear took a hit everywhere in the world.
I agree with you. I have to say I do agree with you there. But of course, the other thing about China is actually security of supply, isn't it? And the ability of fueling this incredible economic growth. Is that something you see in your analysis?
Absolutely. In fact, we've done quite a bit of work with on the Indian Ocean as a locus of trade now, especially for China and for its increasing blue water navy. So I think China's looking, it's going to have a global presence in terms of energy. I think it's going to take a portfolio approach. It's going to use everything, including coal. Certainly renewables. Its wind farms are growing faster than even the UK, I think. So you're absolutely right. Energy security is a big issue, but I think energy security can be. I don't think it's a drop-dead issue for them. I don't think it's a situation where they have to do something to absolutely import less oil. I think they see oil as just part of the solution, and I think their presence overseas, in many, many countries, is part of that energy security issue. So
that's very interesting. Well, just one last question, if I can. You know, we talked about the oil price level, and I just really, really wonder, what level of oil price can the global economy actually sustain? And what oil price are we going to start to see demand falling? Simply, can the world economy support a price of $100+ oil without seeing any effect on demand?
Well, I'm sure you've read all the studies on elasticity of demand. It's a complicated issue. I think one of the things that happens, and especially in the United States where we don't tax oil very heavily, is we've always felt that there was this sort of magic threshold at $4 per gallon. We've now been at the threshold for over a month.
It's still cheaper than the UK.
It's still cheaper, exactly. But I do think I don't see a dramatic change in demand growth unless we stay at these price levels for, say, 6 to 12 months. Then I do see changes in structural behavior. Right now it's just sort of discretionary consumption. This is also a huge issue for developing countries. And in a way, I mean, that may be the bigger impact than even the United States.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much for joining us here today.
My pleasure.
And enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.